Okay, so
Good.
welcome, Faraz.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And good morning to everyone, or good evening in Papua New Guinea, or good very early morning, and good afternoon wherever you may be. Here in China, it's past 10 p.m. So good evening to my friend Todd, who's also online. Before we get into the main presentation, I just want to share a bit of background. Um, my family and I moved to Dali here in Yunnan province about 25 years ago in 1999. And at the time, I established a company called Praxis Agricultural Company. And we basically started a model a tripartite model that would bring the best out of what we think the best out of the agriculture and rural development process in the value chain, which is farming, food production, and retail. Our initial activities explored the potential of our region's various microclimates. For example, if we drove north about 2 hours, we were planting raspberries and blackberries, and driving about an hour south where we are, we started growing avocados and lemons and artichokes and etc. As part of our food production, we built a certified food works for minimally processed foods. An example of which, for example, is cheese production, where local farmers who typically own 2 or 3 cows produce milk, and we purchase their milk and produce cheese in small batch productions. We've had more failures than successes, of course, though it's been enough to keep us going and makes our company resemble more of a non-profit operation. One of our big successes, I would say, is that we've been able to produce the earliest cherries in the Northern Hemisphere. And this year we started our harvest in February and ended it in Nowruz. Other activities include on-site learning activities, such as various camps for different age groups and day events, but we mainly focused on junior youth. And in recent years, primarily we've been focusing on regenerative agriculture to rehabilitate the depleted soils in our area. That's been because they've been using chemicals and it's depleted the carbon in the soil. This is a picture of one of our plots that we've been able to take lease from from a local farmer who just gave up. He was using chemicals and pesticides. And you can see that we're intercropping perennials with annuals. There are avocado trees and chirimoya trees, and between them we're growing certain the various annuals. So although we've established the business about 25 years ago, my wife and I, we've been basically using most of our time in helping our children homeschool. So the activity, not until about 4 years ago, was not full-time. It was basically a part-time activity. So we leased this property from the farmer, and we introduced intercropping practices, cover crops, companion planting, biochar production from the prunings that we had from our perennials. We produced bioavailable fertilizers on a land that previously used pesticides and chemicals by its owner. So using the regenerative agricultural practices over the last 3 years or so, we've been able to increase the soil microbial biomass by several fold. And also its fungal to bacteria ratio has reached a healthy balance, which is an indicator that the soil biodiversity and function has been improved. And you might be familiar with the microbiometer. That's what we use to measure the two indicators there. We also applied some mineral amendments to our heavy clay soils, and we continue to inoculate the soils and plants with compost extracts that are aged for over 12 months and have a highly diversified microorganism population. And with that, we use Johnson Sioux bioreactor that you may be familiar with. The typical land ownership in this area per family is about 1/6 of an acre. So bearing that in mind, as we go forward, we can see how we have to take the context within which we operate into account. So this is a chart that we use to measure the progress of the soil that we improve over the years. And it's made up of two key indicators, again, using the microbiometer. On the y-axis, you can see the microbial biomass. And on the x-axis, we have the fungal to bacteria ratio. We also help local farmers measure their progress over the various seasons to see if their practices have positive results. Okay, so we go down. Our primary aim is to build trust between farmers and consumers throughout the community we serve. And of course, by incorporating Baha'i-inspired principles and practices, promoting excellence in the workplace and the products we offer. Also, we encourage continuous learning and innovation. We help promote the status of women. For example, our food works is mainly run by and managed by women. I believe we only have one male staff in there. Service integrity, putting people over profits while trying to be a viable entity is another factor. We do some community outreach and education events, sometimes camps, and also have posts on our social media. We also work with the local government and have an ongoing program with Peking University involving projects that help the impoverished areas of our of our region. So, and finally, we work with a network of independent retailers by educating them and providing them with the information for which they're able to sell our products. So here you can see some examples of our produce. So here we try to bring back some forgotten tastes in our fruits and vegetables that are nutrition dense. And one of our main goals in the field is to see how we can capture carbon by increasing our microbial biomass in the soil. So we've also, to identify ourselves, we've chosen a brand called Sol, which in Spanish means sun, but actually it represents, it's registered as a spice of life. And it also has a catchy Chinese name, which I might share with you later. So the Baha'i teachings refer to agriculture as a noble science. And we know science is adherence to natural laws and principles. So we might ask, what's noble about agriculture? For one, Baha'u'llah states that agriculture is the first among all services. And in relation to agriculture, Abdu'l Baha mentions that we must begin with the farmer as the first active agent in human society. So a farmer's motivation to serve society begins with the knowledge and understanding that he or she is created noble, and that helps us serving as an inspiration for the pursuit of excellence in both our thoughts and actions for the betterment of society. Today's presentation touches on just one aspect of the learning process, helping bridge an understanding between our physical and spiritual reality. I'm trying to go between two screens here. Let's see, sorry. So today's presentation consists of two parts. First, we'll go through the concept of what is quorum sensing and how it functions in the living soil socio-biome, which is the community of a milieu of diverse microorganisms. And then we will revisit the same slides for the interactive portion, where participants will identify and relate Baha'i principles, concepts, and actions related to community building, and match them to what we may consider as the equivalent in what was presented in part one. A partial list has been provided for your consideration, I believe. So this exercise, though at times may appear to be somewhat lighthearted, is meant to spark deeper understanding of the nature and its relevance to our true reality. It is an attempt to allow us to share many personal perspectives that may emerge from our discussions. So the title of today's presentation is Quorum Sensing, the Soil Socio-biome, and Community Building. And here we will try to explore parallels between nature and our spiritual reality. In today's loosely termed regenerative agricultural practices, The primary goal is to regenerate our living soils to optimum levels, resulting in the multiple benefits. That's to produce nutrition-dense plants, which then give us quality foods and improve the health of animals and humans, as well as a flourishing ecosystem as nature intended. Such an approach to regenerating our soils can be likened to rehabilitating our lost fortunes in not just the material realm, but also our spiritual reality. Natural systems are highly complex. They follow certain principles and processes that are being continuously discovered with new discoveries in the scientific community. One such phenomena being a process called quorum sensing. It plays an essential part in rejuvenating soils that act as one of the bases for a healthy and vibrant agricultural system. So we shall go through a basic explanation of this phenomena and follow it up with an interactive portion where we will try to identify parallels in our Baha'i-inspired activities in promoting the cause through both personal as well as social transformation for the betterment of our communities. As we go through the initial part of the presentation, you may take notes associating certain underlying technical points in the presentation to your own activities, whether spiritual in nature or related to the community building process. For example, you may connect the consultative process, universal participation, entry by troops, unity of thought and action, etc., to one or more of the points in the presentation. So before we begin, I'd also like to add that time permitting, we can have an open discussion regarding the broader parallels as to why we exist together with nature and how it relates to the following quotes. Excuse me. Say, nature in its essence is the embodiment of my name, Baha'u'llah states. The maker, the creator. Its manifestations are diversified by varying causes. And in this diversity, there are signs for men of discernment. Nature is God's will, and it is its expression in and through the contingent world. It is a dispensation of providence ordained by the ordainer, the all-wise. And Abdu'l Baha states that reflect upon the inner realities of the universe, the secret wisdom involved, the enigmas, the interrelationships, the rules that govern all. For every part of the universe is connected with every other part by ties that are very powerful and admit of no imbalance, nor any slackening, whatever. So what is quorum sensing? But before we begin, I'd like to just mention a few words about symptoms and causes in our current agricultural processes. In agriculture, pests and diseases are attributed or are a function of low diversity in the soil microbial community. It also produces low nutrient levels as well as low productivity. Why would one associate low diversity with such negative outcomes in agriculture, one may ask? One answer can be found in the phenomena called or known as quorum sensing. A leading researcher, an Australian lady, Dr. Christine Jones, who's retired recently, but has been a leader in the field of agricultural systems, defines quorum sensing as density-dependent, coordinated behavior that regulates gene expression in the microbial population and or in the host plant or animal. So in our DNA, there are a whole range of gene expressions. For example, some code proteins and others regulate other genes and so on. However, not all genes seem to be always expressing themselves. These genes can be turned on or off because of epigenetics, which is the environment, where the environment determines the expression of the genes without altering the DNA. In the living soil socio-biome, communications between microbes occur by signaling compounds called autoinducers. These are released into the soil for the same species to pick up in their own languages or for different species to pick up. That is to say, some are species specific while others communicate with different species in a range of different languages, quote unquote. So quorum sensing in bacteria can be either species specific or can be across species. These signals can be picked up by other bacterial species, fungal species, plants or animals, and microbes and plants can thus communicate with each other. Quorum sensing is density specific, that is, a low density of bacterial species produce a low amount of autoinducers, whereas a high density of bacterial species produce high amounts of autoinducers. For quorum sensing to occur, it requires a threshold to be reached. That's to say, a certain density of autoinducers for gene expression to occur. Genes within the bacteria, plant, or animals is then switched on from a non-expressive to an expressive state. So one of the things we may want to discuss is what happens, what are the factors that help induce this change from a non-expressive state to an expressive state, as we see parallels in the human interactions. So it is important for soil microbes to conserve energy and resources. In the case of low density situations, if microbes continue to express some genes, they use up valuable resources with no real impact. So reaching and passing a certain threshold can produce real impact. For example, the production of enzymes or other beneficial compounds, which are important for the health of the soil, socio-biome, and plant relationships. This can also occur in the human body, as in the case of E. coli, which is generally present in small amounts in our gut biome. But what causes a disease to occur is when, under certain conditions, its numbers build up to reach a threshold and release toxins to our detriment. So quorum sensing is used both by pathogens as well as beneficial microbes. For example, rhizobia bacteria require quorum sensing to produce nodulation on roots to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. And over every acre of land, there's at least 30 tons of free nitrogen gas available for use by these bacteria. Pseudomonas, when reaching certain thresholds, communicate between plants and pathogens in a complex process, resulting in the production of antibiotics for defense purposes, or the production of biofilm to protect bacteria during stressful times. Bacillus bacteria produce an enzyme called phosphatase that helps solubilize phosphorus, which is otherwise locked up in the soil and not bioavailable. So quorum sensing is required by such microbes in order to produce certain desired results. And fungi also help in the process of transportation and communication. So the question remains how to stimulate these microbes. In order to activate the process of quorum sensing and bring about beneficial outcomes. We learn from nature in at least two ways. One is using biostimulants and or microbial inoculants. And the second way is increasing plant diversity. So we know that diversity drives all systems, not just above ground, but below ground. And each of these plants have their unique abilities to draw and contribute the nutrients and microbes in the soil socio-biome. Finally, there is another side to quorum sensing, and it's called quorum quenching. Here, a pathogen in the soil is using quorum sensing to attack a certain plant, let's say. But the communication process can be disrupted when, when you have a high amount of plant diversity, each with its unique set of contributing factors, in which case the signal between the pathogens is disrupted or outnumbered by beneficial microbes to reduce the negative impact of the pathogens. Quorum sensing functions as a form of protection or balance within the soil socio-biome. Such processes involving healthy plants and a flourishing soil socio-biome result in a higher carbon capture within the soil and nutrition density than conventionally grown produce, and allows plants to be more resilient to biotic and abiotic stresses. If there are any questions about the actual process of quorum sensing, we can address it during the second part. This suggested list of words now has been shared here. And the idea is for us to now go back to the portion of presented, the portion about quorum sensing, and try to, this is an open discussion, interactive part of the presentation, where we will try to relate certain processes in the quorum sensing uh, explanation with what might be we consider it to be in our community building process. So how are we doing with time? I guess it's
Oh, we're good.
you're good. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
we're good. We
So
have
I
time.
don't know if I went through that too fast, if there were any questions before we move on back to the slides. I'm sorry that I've been hesitating going through two screens because my main screen that I'm sharing is blocked, slightly blocked, and I can't quite follow. I don't know, Don, if can we can you perhaps now can I switch it on to you to present the to show the slides, the green background slides,
Oh,
or shall we just
well, the way I have it now, folks can, if you want to see the gallery of everyone's here, you can just move the divider over, and you'll be able to see everyone. So in the next to your screen on the right, there should be a divider. If you know how to move that, grab that with your cursor and move it to the side, and you should be able to see everyone. I know it's different for you, Faraz, because you're sharing screen, things look different, but everyone else should be able to see. Is anyone having trouble seeing everyone? Everyone good? Okay, so it looks like everyone. So Faraz, can you see the gallery? You can see everyone who's here?
I can see at least seven people in a column.
Okay.
Uh,
So yeah, because I guess you're having problems because you can't see your cursor. Is that correct?
yeah, that's right. I'm
Yeah, you
sorry
can't
about
move
that.
it down to that corner to open it. Um,
So anyway, can you see the screen I'm sharing now?
yes, I can see it. Yes.
So this is the top
Everyone,
of the quorum sensing part, um, and we can just open up to everyone, uh,
right.
and I can and
So if you,
how so
right.
you see
So
it.
if everyone,
Mhm.
if you could raise your hand, then maybe for us we would be able to see you, and I will be able to see you. If you have a comment or a question at this point. So do you want to I just want to mention I did place in the chat that list of terms. So did you, Faraz, how did you want to handle this with the list of terms? I did place it in the chat there so that people can look at that list.
Okay. Um, what I'll do is just randomly, perhaps first choose uh, one of uh, the concepts, and
Mhm.
everyone is then free to uh, share what they think it represents in our activities and in the community building activity, uh, whether it's a process, whether it's a concept, principle, etc.
Hmm. I can just mention there's something that came to my mind as you were talking about quorum sensing, which I've never heard of that term before. Before this, I don't know about anyone else who's heard this term before, but your description of it reminded me of in it's in our current discussions on state of humanity and what we need to be doing at this particular time, that we're always supposed to be aware of what's going on in our at the exigencies of the time that we live in, right? It made me think of this phrase that we use of reading the reality, reading our reality, that it reminded me of how plants are reading their reality, right? Microbes are reading the reality around them. So it's just that's an interesting kind of correlation I saw.
Yeah. Another idea that comes to mind, for example, the word quorum. What does that conjure up in our imagination? We have quorums when we have meetings. Quorum sensing, to me, suggests the idea of having a majority going through a process that would be similar to consultation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And where the majority then would come to an understanding through both unity of thought and action.
Right.
So
Amber has her hand up. Amber, did you have a thought or a question?
Sure. It's maybe a reflection. I also trained in biology and have been fascinated by this quorum sensing phenomenon that exhibits in lots of spaces in the natural world. And I really loved this parallel of how low diversity causes problems in agriculture generally, and how if we think about that in terms of one of humanity, whenever there's low participation or it's the lack of universal participation, the lack of diversity, it creates many forms of harm and disunity. And so I really appreciated that piece. I think there is one other thing. Maybe I'll leave it there for now, but yeah, I'm really excited about this concept also. And I think it has a lot of merit I was also thinking about the threshold, how there's, we have this concept of a threshold and threshold conversations, and how different um, different different qualities are able to find expression at a certain threshold. And that's what quorum sensing is all about. There's a latency, and then when a certain amount of density is reached, then an expression of a new function is possible. And I think this also helps encourage us to stay with it while we're still in the learning, so that a new function can emerge, because there's a lot of work often necessary that difficult while we're still in this building, increasing density, and then the expression comes. It's a little bit that cycles of crisis and victory. Yeah, there's a lot there. I'll stop.
Thank you. Winnie?
I don't know if others have the difficulty I do with the technology. I finally had to ask if I could be unmuted. And I just wanted to be sure that everyone knows how they can unmute and raise their hand, because it's not easy for me. But I also, in trying to do that, I'm not sure I'm on target, but I would like to mention that Abdu'l-Baha's writings are so much about the reciprocity, the collaboration, the cooperation that human beings need in order to really move us toward world peace and the governance that we really need. And it strikes me that there's a governance in the soil that people have been completely ignorant of. And science is helping us to quickly, lately, learn, for instance, that what I call recreational plowing, it's not useful for the land if you want to regenerate it. And I'm happy to see that in my own locale in North Carolina, suddenly the fields are not being plowed. The stubble is remaining, capturing carbon and helping the biome. So I'm very thankful to you, Faraz, for bringing all this to light. And I hope what I said is pertinent to the conversation, because I'm very excited about learning about what's in the soil. And I've been a gardener and teacher of organic gardening for a long time. And I now look back and say, wish I'd known all this a long time ago.
Any thoughts for us?
No,
Any
no,
thought-
I'll let everyone, I have certain ideas that I've thought through, but I want others to have a chance to say something. But
Okay.
I think Neil and then David were raising their hands.
Yeah, I think the philosophical density of this presentation is enormous. I looked at the 16 concepts we were supposed to discuss, and obviously we're not going to cover them all. But just in response, I'm glad we're consulting, because out of consultation, we generate new ideas. So just in response to Amber, the word, like I've checked out the Wikipedia article on quorum sensing, and no one really explains why they came up with the word quorum. But anyway, I'll look into that. But it was just this idea of tipping point. That is the word that really, when I listened to Amber, because I started out in microbiology in a horticultural research station, but I think this idea of tipping point is very much related to entry by troops and mass whatever. But I think I just wanted to share that in many communities, in which the Baha'i community is involved, there are certain tipping points. These are called milestones. And I just wanted to sort of add that to the mix.
Yeah. Yes. As a matter of fact, where I mentioned the Johnson Su bioreactor, which multiplies both the numbers and the diversity of microorganisms over a period of a year. And from what I understand, for example, to your point, if you want microbe number 3 to appear, it can only appear if microbe 1 and 2 are present. And therefore, microbe 3 is able to come and express itself. And then with that combination, maybe microbe number 4 or 5 and so on will then come into in the process of the compost that they're making, which is the same process as would happen in the soil.
Right.
So David, go ahead. Sorry.
Faraz, I just wanted to make a comment there, just to, some people may not know what a Johnson Su biomass is, what that is, what it looks like. It's a pretty simple thing, actually, right?
Yeah. So basically, it's aerobic, vertical, 2-meter high column where access to air is not more than 30 centimeters or 12 inches from the mass that's in there that's being transformed by the worms that are in there. Mm-hmm. And it's you can look it up. It's by Professor David Johnson, who's I think at the University of New Mexico, and he's come up with this as an alternative to having animals on your farm. So in our context, where we have the average family with 1/6 of an acre plot, it's not very practical to have animals while you also are growing your vegetables and grains. So instead, of the animals introducing this variety of microorganisms, you use this Johnson Su compost process to provide. And within 12 months, you'll have literally hundreds, if not thousands, of varieties of bacterial species. And the interesting part is that this compost is then fungal dominant. So the ratio of fungi to bacteria is greater than 1:1, which means it affects or improves the efficiency of the interaction in the soil between the roots of the plant and the soil itself. The key underlying factor, again, comes down to diversity.
Right. Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar. I watch a lot of YouTube videos about people doing different kinds of things, different kinds of composting, and it looks like a relatively simple setup. It's basically a compost bin, and in the middle is a pipe, right? Is that correct?
6 pipes. Yeah.
6 pipes, 6. Okay. I guess people have done some variations on it, right? Simplified it, but so that there's contact with the air constantly. So you said it's no more than 12 inches. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the furthest distance from any source of oxygen, basically, to keep it aerobic. Yeah.
Right.
So you don't have to turn the compost. It's static. It's a static pile that stays there. And all you have to do is make sure that you have enough moisture throughout the year and it doesn't freeze.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, David. Sorry.
I just wanted to share 2 terms that I haven't heard but came to mind right away that are related. One is just phenotype and genotype. I mean, it was addressed early on, but not with those terms, and just the concept that, everything has a genotype, and it's that environmental that expresses the phenotype or what we actually see or experience. And then the other thing is critical mass, which quorum sensing and critical mass seem to be, very similar, as well as tipping point. And so how that relates to our focus is just, it's very difficult to have a conversation with somebody that thinks the way you do, or in a way that's related to your concerns, without knowing that they exist. And so this idea of to have a good conversation, meaningful conversation that's going to go somewhere, not just begin and end in words, is how do we have the systems that determine where those other elements are that can, we can bring together to have a conversation. And then, the next step is really, okay, if you have people that have a common interest in something and getting something done, then sometimes organizations come out of that, whether it be initially a individual initiative or a partnership that turns into an institution, or at least a structure framework for social action. So those are just thoughts that came to mind in listening to this presentation. And I thank you very much for the stimulating thoughts.
Yeah, to your point about communicating, the last paragraph in this slide, I've underlined where species talk to their own among themselves in their own language, and I've also underlined a range of different languages. So in our core activities, basically among Baha'is, we are sharing the same quote unquote language of of our activities and how we understand that'll promote society. On the other hand, on another level where we have social action, where it's not necessarily to promote the faith, but just to serve our community, we may express that in a range of different languages, which is through services. So that's just an example of what came to my mind. What I'd like to, though, ask is, what do you think represents auto-inducers? Because these are what bacteria, let's say in the soil, emit in order to get that critical mass, as you mentioned. So in your mind, what would represent auto-inducers? Amber looks like she might have an idea.
Definitely had something that came to mind. I'm curious if others have similar. I mean, the first thing that pops into mind is the word of God, the potency of the word of God.
The
And
creative
maybe
word, yeah.
it's the prayer, maybe it's a writing. Depending on the context, it might be somebody's expression of it to a friend in their own words, depending on that person's readiness. I'm curious what others think.
Well, you ticked 3 of the points I had on my list. Christine and
Well, the first thing that came to my mind was also the word of God, and then the other one was individual initiative. And I just want to comment on the idea for this webinar. I think it's wonderful. It's very original because there is, like there is a correlation between the spiritual world and the physical world, and there is a reflection of each law or each sign in the spiritual world, in the natural world. So it really helps us to think along these lines. And then I have a practical question. How do you keep a compost from freezing in the winter?
yeah, a lot of people in the Midwest have asked the same question in the States. We're fortunate to have a mild climate throughout the year, so we don't get those conditions. However, you can house it inside let's say, a shed or somewhere where you don't get below freezing temperatures.
Well, our shed goes below freezing because there's no heat in it. It's yeah.
Right. So maybe wrapping it with a heat mat, perhaps,
Mhm.
or a blanket that would generate some amount of heat to just keep out the frost.
Mhm. Thank you.
So
Jay,
please go ahead.
Jay, you're muted.
I thought I had one ahead of me there. So, but I remember hearing a
Oh, Jay.
presentation by a writer.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I remember hearing a presentation by a writer, and before she starts writing, she basically creates these different, story buckets. And so, if she gets an idea, she just, tosses it in the bucket. And eventually there's enough stuff in the bucket, a quorum, critical mass, whatever, that, she's got something to write with. So, I think what is the bucket? And again, back to auto-inducers. Is there as we are trying to induce or stimulate conversation or put out feelers here and there, how do the responses get collected until we can, determine that there's a critical mass or a quorum? And so a website, or well, basically just an address. And on the internet, the URL is the web address. So if you have putting out information, whether it's a card with a QR code on it, or brochure or letter or anything, sign, that can direct other signals back to that point, and can be a collector, aggregator of where there is sufficient interest or critical mass to make something happen. So anyway, websites, QR codes. If anybody does, I don't know if anybody listens to the Society Builders podcast by Dwayne Varan. Highly recommended. But he was in many years ago in a college club that they had, Baha'i College Club, to get the word out. They just made these bookmarks that had a calendar of like community events on one side, and like their Baha'i Club events on the other. And that was a way to get signals out. But I think my mind's racing right now, but I just having ways to a bucket for what are the potential auto inducers or signaling stations or signal paths or signal means, to have access to that type of thing readily available, I think would be a great resource.
Well, we know that daily prayers, when intoned, will have sooner or later their effects on those receptive souls around us. So we have both something that's visible and something that's, for example, our actions and words and actions that might induce others to or prompt them to take action. But prayers, I understand, of course, would also be something that we could include as an auto-inducer.
Yeah.
Neil?
Wait a minute. Could we go back?
Yeah.
Jay had his hand up before,
Okay.
Okay,
and something happened.
I'll be real quick.
Yeah.
I'll be real quick. For an auto-inducer, it could be just like the microbes react to the pathogens. We could react to the suffering of mankind or threats to our communities.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes. So, yeah, those we talked about in the very beginning about pests and diseases. So that could have a correlation with what you said. And low nutrient levels, losing our morals in society, and in the current political system.
Yes. So, Neil?
It's love. Love is a huge auto-inducer. You have to love, as Abdu'l Baha said, love everybody you meet. And that only comes with cultivating your own spiritual condition. But I think that's huge.
Love and fellowship, yeah. Jahan, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Faraz. I remember the presentation that we made to the farmers in Dali about organic agriculture a few years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, in terms of auto-inducers, I think many of what I was thinking were mentioned, but perhaps prayers, meditation, inspiration, contemplation, and intuition might be a way to induce progress in the world of humanity.
Right. Anyone else? Shall I suggest one point that I put on the list?
Yeah, we do have
How
some
do you?
we do have some comments in the chat as well.
Oh, okay.
People are hesitant to raise their hand and speak. So there are a couple of comments here. Let's see. So I think, let's see what I've got here. Yes. So let's see. So there's a comment here that diversity is also protective. Going back to the concept of diversity is protective. Microorganisms on our skin protect us from pathogens. The same happens on leaves of plants. And then Janelle mentioned that on a farm, they use PVC tubes wrapped with tarps to build the Johnson Su composter. And then there were also some comments about how to keep it warm, insulation with hay bales, and snow. So if you live in a place that has lots of snow, snow can actually act as an insulator for your compost. Okay, so I guess Mark.
Hi, Don. So we're looking at scientific applications, and we're looking at a metaphor for a spiritual perspective. Having had this conversation, can we go back to those two quotes, one by Baha'u'llah, one by Abdu'l-Baha? And I think it would have, I'm reflecting on it, it has a lot more meaning following this discussion.
Now, are you referring to this that's on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
I'm just, well, someone could say nature in its essence is the embodiment of my name, the maker, the creator. Its manifestations are diversified by varying causes, and in this diversity, there are signs for men of discernment. Nature is God's will, and in its expression in and through the contingent world. It is a dispensation of providence ordained by the ordainer, the all-wise. Reflect upon the inner realities of the universe, the secret wisdom involved, the enigmas, the interrelationships, the rules that govern all. For every part of the universe is connected with every other part by ties that are very powerful and admit of no imbalance nor any slackening whatever. And so just having our discussion and going through this thing just deepens the meaning to these quotes, for me anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, that first quote triggered something in my mind, and I put it on the list of the list of words, and I presented it as prejudice versus discernment, because the word discernment appeared there in that first quote. And while I was doing some of the farming chores the other day, the thought process that came to my mind, why discernment versus, and what does it mean? Why did I juxtapose it with prejudice or ignorance, I could say? In natural systems that are created, they're created perfect through an evolution over 4 billion years. And nature's laws and principles are basically fixed. and governed by, cause and effect. Whereas human interactions, whose cause and effects are perfectly laid out by our creator, they're also determined by our choices. So based on our level of knowledge, volition, and action, and of course, spirit of faith, which we teach to our junior youth in the book 5 series, in the Institute book 5 series. So enhancing our awareness of nature's workings provides us a way to understanding and practice our spiritual endowments in this transient world. So when we talk about discernment, it's related to what we learn and how we apply it. And that's very much to do with our choices. And if we are to then deeply meditate and reflect on the workings of nature, which are perfect, nature has no prejudice because it's perfect. And our choices, therefore, if we introduce prejudice through our own ignorance, then we step out of that perfect divine system that we've been given to carry out our lives. I don't know if the idea is coming across or not, but meaning basically nature has no choice but has been created perfect. We, with our ability to choose, should try to reach perfection. And by reflecting on the interrelationships within nature, quorum sensing being one, for example, you may have heard of the rhizophagy cycle, which is a new discovery, a recent discovery. The whole idea of photosynthesis, nitrogen fixation. So all these interdependencies in the soil food web. And what does it mean to capture carbon, for example? How does that mean? Because carbon is the currency in the biological ecosystem. What is the currency in our spiritual system that we need to capture and keep as we develop civilization? So that's one of the ideas that just came through reading that first quote that you asked. Was it Neil?
Mark.
Mark, sorry.
So we have a question in the chat here from Pete Smith. Can you comment on how well this process has been accepted by local farmers?
Which process, sorry?
Maybe the quorum
sensing?
sensing, maybe. I'm not sure. Pete, are you there? Can you unmute,
Yeah.
Pete? There you go.
Yes, yes, I mean the quorum process.
Yeah, so when we established our Praxis Agricultural Company, one of the first things we tried to establish in the company culture with the core group was the consultative process. And so as far as not the technical term, but in the management term, that has carried through. And it's been reinforced with basically a more flat organization where everyone is more functionally oriented rather than managerial levels or whatever. But the technical quorum sensing, most of our staff have, because they live in the area, they don't have more than a high school education, some even less. And so how to actually relate this to them is not easy. But during our junior youth classes, we do introduce these concepts. So those who are interested in at least agriculture or nature, we introduce that. And so it's maybe we are trying to apply it to future farmers rather than current farmers.
Mm.
Okay. Can I put another question to everyone?
Sure.
How do you see quorum quenching as a metaphor in our activities, in our collective activities, in our community building activities? The concept of quorum quenching, where again, I've underlined certain words where a pathogen. So what's a metaphor for a pathogen that's attacking? How can its signal be disrupted or outnumbered? So in the list of words,
Right.
do you find something that you could relate to?
Well, one of the things that I think of is that how Baha'u'llah talks about the divine physician as its pulse on humanity, and you have to see what the disease is first, and then make the suggestion of what's the cure, what's the prescription for that. So to me, it does relate in that sense. The pathogen being an illness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The divine physician has its pulse on humanity. So John?
Yes.
Yes, I was thinking that consultation, the process of consultation, may be another way to protect the community from bad ideas or from these pathogens that can attack the community.
Right.
The thought of backbiting, came to mind, and Abdu'l-Baha's encouragement of how we respond to that, and basically just raising the question, what good, could come out of this? And as the, quorum, or as more and more people that share those thoughts in a community, let's say, just take backbiting, for example. If you've got a group of 10 people, and 2 or 3 of them see the harmfulness of backbiting, and one person brings up how could this be a benefit, and somebody else kind of supports that, then you've got kind of the yeast in that particular group that transitions away from the social activity of backbiting to maybe something more positive. That brings to mind the song Alice's Restaurant, if anybody remembers the Arlo Guthrie piece about, it was, if one person comes in and mentions something, people don't even pay attention. If 2 people, they may raise their heads. But if 3 people, you've got a movement. And so just, again, the numbers. Another term that I thought of that I haven't heard in this is just the concept of permaculture. And it seems that this is permaculture does incorporate the types of things that are being discussed in this presentation. So that's another avenue to look at and find local people that have some alignment with some of this thinking.
Thanks, David. Christine?
Yeah, that was very interesting what was just said. I'm going back to the question. I was thinking that, that there are often people, they live in social groups, be it they are kind of uniform race, or they don't really know, they don't have deep friendships with people from other races, or let's say other tribes, depending on where you live in the world. But when you have diversity in your community, and you really become friends with people that are different from you, it really, you can easily overcome all these prejudices, whatever they are, because we realize that we are all humans, but as long as we don't have the diversity, it's difficult. It stays a concept, like the unity of humanity. We really have to experience it, I think.
Neil?
It's just protection. I see that in the notes it says quorum quenching is a form of protection. This dimension of protection in the Baha'i community is really important, and it's very, it's something, we tend to get into it when a problem arises, but it is a very important function of the councillors and the auxiliary board and of assemblies.
Yeah. Right. And in order to bring that protection, which is one of the twin duties of Baha'is, as we recognize Baha'u'llah, besides teaching the faith. So to bring about that protection, sometimes what comes to mind where Abdu'l Baha talks that when we have a thought of war, we need to oppose it with a stronger thought of peace. And when a thought of hatred appears, then we must destroy it with a more powerful thought of love. So quorum quenching for me brings this thought to mind, this quote from Abdu'l Baha, where the negative forces are outnumbered by the positive forces. And empowering the positive forces, the underlying factor is universal participation by the largest diversity possible within the community. So that happens within the soil community and is a lesson to reflect on in our human community too. So that's one thought that came to mind.
So Amber's put a comment in the quote, quorum quenching, disrupt and examine negative forces through consultation with diverse perspectives. So that's just kind of the same thought, I think. So any other comments, any other thoughts? We're coming close to our time now. It's very late for us. He's probably fading. Are you fading?
No, I'm okay. I have a couple of other questions to pose, but
okay,
it depends.
Yeah, go as long as you.
Someone had their hand.
I don't
No?
see a hand.
I took it down.
Okay.
You said it was low on time. A couple other metaphors would be the introduction of truth to remove the negative effects of backbiting and untruths. And another one might be, as your faith is, so your power shall be.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw out two books I've come across very recently. One is called The Idea-Driven Organization, which is a organizational way of being receptive to those signals that are being sent out, from the grassroots. The other is Strategic Doing, by I think Ed Morrison and others. But two books I've come across very recently that I think are very much aligned with complex systems and being open to signals.
Thank you, David.
So perhaps one last one, which is very last phrase there. Where do you see a metaphor that would match with the resilience to biotic and abiotic stress? So biotic stress might be, for example, pests attacking a plant, and abiotic might be conditions such as drought, heat, rain, wind, and so on.
Christine?
Well, I think on the one hand, it's the covenant that protects us from inside and outside. When you look at, the two different aspects, attacks, but also a healthy community is resilient. A healthy and diverse community is resilient against attacks from the inside and from the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for putting those books in the chat there, David. Someone had mentioned, I don't know if it was you, that mentioned Society Builders, a podcast.
No, as David mentioned it.
Was it David?
Would someone like to read that? Oh, Christine, you had your hand up. Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to announce the upcoming webinar of the Baha'i-inspired International Environment Forum. It's in the chat. All the information is in the chat. But we usually announce and in each other's webinar. So the International Environment Forum puts these webinars of the agriculture group into their newsletter if we get it enough time ahead so that it makes it into the newsletter. And the agriculture group always announces the webinars of the International Environment Forum. And the upcoming topic will be really related to our topic today. So just look into the chat. There are links where you can click for more information and to register. It will be this coming weekend on the 6th of April, the Sunday.
Thank you, Christine. would someone like to read the quote? Oh, Amber?
Sorry, I was just wondering if Faraz, did you have an answer to that last question you posed about resilience of abiotic and biotic that you had been thinking of?
Yeah, well, I think who was it pretty much answered what I had in mind. And the covenant, then I'm sorry that my mind is jumping all over the place. So having us have the covenant being one of the basic protections. But where do we get that, that spirit of faith? And how does that develop? It's pretty much an open question I wanted to put. And I wanted to sort of jump back to the other two phrases that were underlined there: higher carbon capture. What does that relate? How does that relate to the spiritual dimension? And what does nutrition density do? And how then that provides the resilience in the biotic and abiotic conversation. Did you have an idea yourself?
No, thank you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, we're pretty much out of time, so sorry.
That's
Don't
fine.
want to vote. And we don't have to read this. You can just have a look and
Amber, could you read that?
Yeah, I would love
Thank
to.
you.
I'll just read the quote from Baha'u'llah.
yes.
Every man of discernment, while walking upon the earth, feel it indeed abashed, inasmuch as he is fully aware that the thing which is the source of his prosperity, his wealth, might, his exaltation, his advancement and power is, as ordained by God, the very earth which is trodden beneath the feet of all men. There can be no doubt that whoever is cognizant of this truth is cleansed and sanctified from all pride, arrogance, and vainglory.
Thank you, everyone. Janelle, did you have a comment?
Some of us were wondering, he mentioned he would tell us what the Chinese name for soul was.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we picked a name that would sound similar to Sol, and it's in the two middle characters from the 6 characters under, and it's Song Le. Song is part of to be relaxed, and Le is happiness. So it's the idea is to evoke a sense of trust in our products, that, just relax and be happy and enjoy the products that that our farm produces. So, and of course, I have a niece whose name is Sol. My wife, Nicole, who's also, I think, on here present or was present. She's from Chile. And so that's part of a mixture of ideas put into Sol. But of course, it also represents the spice of life, which diversity over variety brings.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you for
getting
coming.
up early and Sunday.
Oh, no, thank
Sunday
you
morning.
for staying up late.
Well, special thanks to Papua New Guinea for staying after midnight.
Yes, yeah, yes, we appreciate that. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Dawn, for helping arrange this.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Faraz.
Thank you, everyone. Good
Bye.
night.
Bye-bye.